train your Gavin. Read those books in a blink, oh yeah. Grab yourself a hot drink cause you're watching How to Train Your Gavin. Yep, that's me.
Hey guys, welcome back to How to Train Your Gavin. Today I'm going through my best books of 2020 list. Best and most surprising actually, because there are some books in this list that I wouldn't really consider one of the best books I read this year, but I love when a book surprises me, and I've been thinking about these books pretty much non-stop since I read them, so even though they aren't the best, they were still very surprising. I did the exact same thing with my worst and disappointing reads of 2020, and I mean, that went down a storm. I mean, I will be swearing in this video as well, so if you have a problem with bad language, then please don't go any further. I do swear like a sailor, so yeah. I read so many books this year and so many books I loved. I decided to do my middle grade top books separately because when I was looking at the best books I read this year and I was going to just do the 10, like the top 10, all of them were middle grade books and I was like, well, crap. So I separated them up. I put my middle grade books in a totally different list. So I have a top 50 middle grade book list that you can watch if you are ever so inclined. It is a bit of a long video. And so these are just all of the adult and young adult books that I read this year that I absolutely loved. I'm actually filming this in front of my YA and adult bookshelves for the first time ever. I just got these for Christmas and I am going to do a proper tour, but they're kind of a mess right now, so I didn't really want to film in front of them. So again, these are just all of my opinions, and you might disagree, you might agree, and that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order by author surname. So the first book that I want to talk about is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I have mentioned this a few times, and actually the next book as well is in the same format, but I mentioned before this year that I just didn't really want to read books that were told in verse. I don't know why, like I genuinely don't know why, I just didn't think I would like them. I was totally misinformed, I guess is the right word for it. I was totally naive in that. So when I finally decided to pick up a verse novel, I was absolutely surprised and in total love with it. So actually I think the next book I'm talking about is the first book that I read that was told in verse. But this one I read anyway, and honestly I was blown away by how lyrical and beautiful this book was. So this one follows two sisters. One of them is called Camino and she lives in the Dominican Republic, and the other is Yahara and she lives in New York City. They both have the same dad, however they do not know each other exists. So one day when their dad dies in a plane crash, after that it goes through their sort of discovery of their dad's secrets and eventually the secret that they each have a sister. And I was absolutely loving the storytelling in this. Elizabeth Acevedo didn't just like unload all of it at once that year. She kind of sprinkled it throughout. There was quite a lot of tension, and as I said, with this being a verse novel, I just didn't think I would like it. So I was so happily surprised when I found out that I actually love the writing style of it, the lyricalness of it, just how it flows, how the story just develops throughout. It is, honest to God, one of the best books I've read this year. I loved getting to know both of the characters as well. They're so different and yet similar as well. Despite being sisters, you get to see how they handle the news, and like the news of their father's death, which was so heartbreaking. It was told in such a heartbreaking way, and also just how they adapt to one another as well. That was quite beautiful. And yeah, I just love this book. I think it's a great book, and if you don't usually read books in verse, then I would definitely recommend maybe starting with this one because I was totally taken by it. Next I have The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This was the first book I read that was verse, and honestly, like when I finished this, I was just like, Gavin, you have been an absolute twat. Like, why? Why were you avoiding books like this your entire life? Why? This is about Michael, and he is a mixed-race teenager who is gay, and he wants more than anything to be a drag artist. And this is so British. This is, you know, set in England. This is so very British. So that's why I really related to this and the whole university experience that we went through in this as well. Like, and as a gay man, I just honestly did 100% identify with Michael. There were, you know, interactions with potential love interests or with boys that I was just like, gosh, is Dean Atta actually writing my life? There were so many powerful and beautiful moments in this, and there were some pop culture references in this as well, which usually I don't like. However, I just absolutely loved them in this because it was just so unapologetically British. Sorry, I'm just choking on the love for this book. There was mentions of Little Mix, and like they're my favourite band of all time, okay? And I will automatically love a book that mentions Little Mix. No, that's actually not true. But this was just, it blew me out of the water, and I absolutely loved the themes and messages of being bold and being yourself and kind of getting rid of, you know, toxic energy and toxic thoughts that stops you from being yourself. There was just, this is like so uplifting and empowering, and because it's taught in verse as well, it just adds a little bit extra to the beautiful imagery and the beautiful messages that this book relays. And yeah, it's just so beautiful. So this is definitely one of the best and one of the more surprising books that I've read this year, because as I said, it totally changed my mind about verse novels, so thank you. Next, I have Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. I have a reading vlog of me reading this as I was camping outside in a tent, and yeah, there were some moments in that. But what I did love the entire experience of reading this, but also I just loved this book and the story it told. So this one is, what's the main character's name again? So this one follows Quinn and her father, and they move to, what's the place called again? Kettle Springs. They go to Kettle Springs. So, okay, I'm starting this synopsis again. This is what I mean about me being a terrible reviewer. I always end up forgetting character names, place names. I only ever remember the story. So this one follows Quinn and her father, and they move to Kettle Springs. And when they're there, they get kind of caught between a battle between old and new. So like the young and the old. And it's like Scream meets I Know What You Did Last Summer kind of thing. And there are teens getting picked off one by one. And then there's just this huge moment where, you know, bloodshed just starts happening, and it seems like a clown in a pork pie hat is behind it all, and we don't know like who's behind the mask and stuff like that. It's just, this was such a great read, so exciting, so intense, and it definitely reminded me of those 90s slasher movies, which is exactly the vibe I really wanted from it. Even with this being a young adult book, there were some moments that I felt pushed the boundaries of young adult and moving slightly into adult, just because some of it was quite gruesome. It didn't really hold back on the violence. Yeah, it was just, there's one moment in particular that I won't spoil, but let's just say my head was blown off. Also, there was some gay shit in this that I was really enjoying, and yeah, it's just, I loved it. And as I said, like, I forgot the character names and like the town name, but still, it was a brilliant story. It was just what I wanted as a young adult horror kind of book. Like, this book was just so much fun. Like, if you want a really fun young adult horror book, like, this is so much fun. And I was really rooting for the characters as well. So when I'm watching a slasher movie, for instance, I have to like at least one of the main characters so that I can root for them to survive. And fortunately, there were a few in this that I really wanted to survive. I mean, some of them might not have, but it was like a really fun journey in the process of reading this. And yeah, I would recommend checking out my vlog as well, where I read this in the tent. I just loved reading it. Next, I have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, and this was one of the funniest books that I've read this year, but also very heartwarming and quite romantic, and I was just so taken by Chloe Brown. So this one does follow Chloe Brown. She is chronically ill, and I can't really speak for that representation, but I did really love her as a character, and I loved her personality so much because she is a computer geek, and she creates a list because she hasn't really experienced a lot, and she is very wary about experiencing some things, but she doesn't really know how to achieve her list. But then along comes Red. He has like so much sex appeal. Them two together, they really bounce off well with each other. They have such great banter. But then he ends up opening up a whole new world to Chloe Brown, and seeing her journey throughout this, I was so proud of her, and like, I was really rooting for her to do all of the things that she really wanted to do, and just, yeah, I was really invested in this story and the character. There was just a lot of sweet moments in this between Chloe and Red. You also get like quite a bit of backstory with Red as well. You learn more about him as a character. So these characters just felt so real. Like, this is one of the most realist adult romances I've ever read, and as I said, I don't really read a lot of romance, but this one just totally convinces me to pick up more, and I can't wait to read more from the series as well. I believe this is the first book in the Brown Sisters series, but I kind of don't want to as well because I love Chloe Brown so much, and I just don't want to be disappointed. I don't think I will be disappointed, but this has raised the bar so high for the series, and I loved it so much. Laugh out loud, romantic, natural as well. Like, I was worried that the romance wouldn't feel natural, but it felt so natural. And honestly, there were times where I was just like usually I cringe at a lot of romance, or I cringe at somebody exerting way too much, I guess, passion or feelings for someone else, and I guess that comes from my bitter singleness. But this one, I was just like, you know, at the end of a really cute romantic movie where you are rolling your eyes during the entire thing, but then at the end you're so convinced that you're just like crying because, oh my god, those characters made it. This was made for this book. Like, oh god, I loved it. Okay, so next on my most surprising list is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Again, I wouldn't say it's one of the best books I read this year, but it is the only thriller book I've read this year. And like, to me it felt like a thriller because like there was quite a lot of like scary moments for me, but again, I'm a newbie to thriller, so if you guys think it's not really a thriller, and I've seen conversations that say it's not really a thriller, then like fair enough. But for me, it was like a thriller because I was a bit scared at points. Anyway, Verity is about an author called Lowen, and she gets this really weird request to finish another author's book series off, and this author has been in a car accident, and we don't really know what's happened there, but the author's husband Jeremy says that she can like live in their house while she collects all the notes and like reads the books and gets prepared to take over this book series. But at the same time, we just don't know what happened to Verity. So Verity is living in the house, and she is pretty much like almost comatose, but not. Like, she seems like she can't do anything, and she can't, like, Jeremy and Nanny has to sort of look after her, and she doesn't speak, she doesn't really move, but there are moments, right, no spoilers in this at all, but there are moments when I was like really doubting myself about what I thought about the characters, and that is a thriller is just one of the, like, the best things for me personally, is when I like doubt so much about what's happening with the characters and the plot and all of that. So I buddy read this with Becca from Becca and the Books, and Kelsey, KJ Sutton. Honestly, like, we were doing voice notes and stuff on Instagram as we were reading this. I love the reading experience of this book, and it's why it's like one of my most surprising, because like just the whole experience of it was just so fun, and it was like a fun thriller for me. And like when I got to the end, like this was my reaction. So we were doing voice notes. This was my actual reaction when I got to the end. Listen to this.
Right, I finished it. Like, give us a minute.
Like, I was honestly like, so there was like a twist at the end that I wasn't expecting. Me and Becca kind of predicted something. Kelsey had already read it, but me and Becca had like predicted something, and it seemed like we would be right, but then we were just totally blindsided by something that happened, and we were like, oh my, what? And even now, like, when I'm thinking about the ending and the plot twist, I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. And like, that whole thing was a fun experience. It just felt like such an interactive experience. I wasn't sure about what the hell was going on for most of it, but also I was really enjoying a lot of the moments when we would read, because the main character, Lowen, she ends up coming across a manifesto by Verity, who is Jeremy's wife, who is the author that Lowen is taken after. Lowen finds this manifesto, and she's been writing it, and like there's some horrific stuff in that manifesto, but again, like, oh gosh, I can't say much. But like, as I was reading that, so much of it unsettled me, and oh gosh, I just wasn't expecting it. Like, so that's why this is one of my most surprising, because I am totally taken by thrillers now. Like, I love them so much. I want to read more thrillers. So thank you, Kelsey, for like recommending that one. I love buddy reading it with you and Becca, and I just, oh my gosh. Oh god, like, it was a good ride. It was a very good ride, I'll give it that. I was also really liking the sexual tension between Lowen and Jeremy as well. I was living for it. I just was not expecting that ending, so that is one of the most surprising books of 2020. Next up is the only non-fiction book that I really have on this list, and that is All Boys Aren't Blue, and this is a memoir by George M. Johnson. George M. Johnson came out as non-binary in July, and I had a review of this book before they came out as non-binary, so please just excuse that review. I do misgender George, but yes, we are going to be using they and them pronouns in this review. So All Boys Aren't Blue literally tells a story about George when they were at school, and not even just at school, but when they were growing up, their family life, their love life, things that they've gone through throughout their lives. You know, goes from racial discrimination to sexual discrimination and everything in between that as well. And when I first read this one, I definitely related so much to George on the sexuality front of it. I was was so like heartbroken for George so many times during this as well, and the fact that I could relate to them on so many different like occasions, not to the extent of George of course, like I can't even compare myself in that regard because they do live as a black queer person in America, and I can't imagine how scary that is. But I mean, I kind of can after reading this. There were so many moments in this where I was scared about the outcome, and even though George has gone through so much in their life, like they don't ever try and put themselves down. You always see the resilience and the strength and the determination that George exudes. Like, oh my gosh, like so inspiring, and I honestly wish that I was more like them when I was growing up, and I wish I had been more brave and more confrontational about things that I'd gone through back then as well. Like, I've taken just so much from this memoir, and just way too much love and adoration for George Johnson. So I cannot wait to see where they go next. I think this is a hugely important read for so many people, and yeah, I just love everything about this book, like so much. Like, thank you so much to the people who recommended this on you know, YouTube and Twitter, because that's where I get most of my book recommendations from, and I think it was Jessie from Bow Ties and Books who recommended this, so thank you so much. Although a lot of people have recommended this, I think it was Jessie who first brought it to light in my attention. Oh, I adore this, and I don't usually read a lot of memoirs. As I said, I don't read a lot of non-fiction, but this, honestly, it changed my mind about them, and 2020 has been full of surprises. It really has. Okay, right, this is not one of the best books I've read this year, okay, but this is one of the most surprising, and that is Off Season by Jack Ketchum. I mean, yes, it probably was the best horror book I've read this year because it horrified me. It gave me nightmares. This one, I can't get so many moments of it out of my head, and I read this back in April, and what surprised me about it was how much this stuck with me. So I do have to warn you, if you're going to read this book, there are so many trigger warnings, there is so much violence I don't even want to, you know, say out loud. But this does follow a group of cannibals who live in the woods, and we follow a writer who decides to do a writing retreat in this, you know, cabin in the woods kind of set. The author ends up getting some of their friends and her boyfriend to come along with as well, and then it details the fateful night when the group of cannibals ends up, you know, terrorizing them. Honestly, there's a specific moment. Well, as soon as it starts kicking off, that is when it gets really horrific. Like, literally from the moment it kicks off with the cannibals and the people in this, like, cabin. It's so hard to explain and describe. Like, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who might want to read this book, but it is horrific. Like, seriously, please go into this knowing just how horrific it is. So I think it did a great job at conveying that. Like, Jack Ketchum, I think, is a great writer in the sense that he is able to create unease, and he is able to really terrify with the visuals. Gosh, I don't know, like, as I said, I don't really read a lot of horror, so I guess, you know, I'm still a bit of a newbie to it. But this one itself, I've never read a horror like it. I've not read a horror like it. Nothing has gotten under my skin more than this book, so that is why it's on my most surprising. I just can't get it out of my head, guys. I just can't get it out of my head. I did read the sequel to this called Offspring, like last month or something, or the month before, and it wasn't as good, but it still had the same themes, it still had the same kinds of violence, and if you're squirmish, just do not read this book whatsoever. Like, please don't do that to yourself. But yes, this really got under my skin. Okay, the reason why my best books of 2020 was a little bit delayed was because I was reading this current book, and I just thought, you know what, this is going to be on my best books of, isn't it? So I'm going to wait until I do my best books of 2020 video, because I think this is going to make it. And it did! And that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So I just finished this yesterday. I loved it. It was so cute and whimsical, and also in a little bit of a morbid way, because we follow Linus Baker, who I don't know why, but I got visions of this world being a little bit like Cat in the Hat. A little bit like Cat in the Hat, you know, with all the manicured lawns and people who are working a very stiff job, and, you know, they have to abide by rules and all of that. It kind of felt like that, which is like a bad comparison to make. I know it's nothing like that really, but it felt that way to me. But Linus is end up given a task to go to this orphanage where there are loads of kids there who have these really dangerous powers, and he has to see if they are are, you know, really dangerous to the world. And we have like the Antichrist here. We have, it's a bit like Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, a little bit in that regard. There are just like kids who are different. And what I loved about this was that when we got to meet these kids, and even though they say some of the most fucked up things at times about like flaying people alive or burying them alive or making their insides on the outside and things like that, there was some like fucked up shit they were saying. However, like, they were so endearing. Like, oh my gosh, it really changed my mind about them. So there's this whole message about not judging people by how they appear, and that's exactly what I did as a reader when I first read this book, and I was thinking, oh gosh, the Antichrist. I mean, it's a bit weird. Like, it's a bit of a weird topic, but it totally convinced me that I shouldn't judge a book by its cover, kind of thing. Really adored Linus, and I loved the LGBTQ plus things that are in this book as well. It was so cute, and just like the kids themselves, oh my god, they were just there's like a moment towards the end that's to do with Linus and him being gay. I don't think it really spoils anything other than just like, I love the kids in this. They are just great. So this was so funny. I really liked the writing style of it. It was very whimsical, and I just wasn't expecting it in the way it was told. I was told this was a bit like middle grade but for adults, and I kind of do see that now, and it's hard to explain that other than when you read it you'll know. But it was just so charismatic. It wasn't boring. There wasn't really a huge exciting moments in this or anything like that, but it was just a great case study into how we perceive people and judgment, and it was so good. So I really enjoyed it, and I kept this video because I thought this would be on it, and I'm so glad that it was, because otherwise I would have made this video late for no reason. So I'm glad this made the list. Ooh. I also finished this one quite recently, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Now, I didn't read this one for the longest time because I was so intimidated. As I said, a lot of adult fantasies intimidate me because I can never get character names to stick, I can't get place names to stick, and all of that. And plus, when they're chunky, it just, I don't know why, but it seriously scares me when a book is like thick. But not just that, but like the writing's small, and I need to stop being like that in 2021, because I discover some of the best books that are in this kind of format, that are chunky, that are adult fantasies, that have small writing, and that's fine, that's totally fine. They can have small writing, they can be chunky, but like, honestly, I don't know why, but I get scared by them. However, we are conquering our fears in 2020 and 2021. So this one follows Rin, and she is very poor. She lives with a really cruel aunt and uncle, and all she wants to do is get accepted into an academy, and she takes this very grueling test to get into this academy, and she has to get into the top academy because it will be free for her, and honestly there are no other options. She has to get to that academy. And what I love about this is that we see Rin in her determination of getting what she wants, but also while everybody is telling her that she can't do it and that she isn't good enough to do it. So honestly, the determination is so inspiring by the main character, just to begin with. But I also love how complex Rin is as well. So when we get towards the end of this book, she makes decisions that, I mean, I haven't read anything else in the series, but they're decisions that I think are going to have huge consequences, and it makes me so excited about this. I love the world building in this too. I loved seeing elements of, you know, different parts of the world, but also how it affects, you know, like things from the past, how that affects the characters in the present. I loved how kind of like the last 2/3 of this book felt so different to the first like third of this book. It kept me so surprised throughout the entire thing. I was so taken by it. It was, honestly, fantastically written. One of the best adult fantasies I've ever read, and I cannot wait to read more. I'm still a little bit scared by the next two in the series because I've seen people get so upset, but in a good way. Like, so many people have been, you know, torn apart emotionally by this series, and I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. So I might let this sit for a little bit so I can catch my breath. But honestly, this one, oh god, it blew me away. It blew me away. I need to stop being intimidated by big books. That needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. Okay, next, I'm not really going to talk too much about this one. I have a whole vlog dedicated to this one where I dress up as one of the characters, but that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. In my humble opinion, the best Court of Thorns and Roses book so far. However, I did see Monty post a tweet today, and I will link his channel down below as well. He said, right, and honestly, he makes such a good point, but when he says, this book has no plot, just a series of vaguely connected beats, Oh my gosh, like, call me out like that, why don't you? I definitely agree with that, and it makes me rethink this just a little bit, because even though I do, honestly, I love this book so much, like, just because I was so taken by Recent and Feyre, and I know that's, like, not the best reason to love this book or anything like that. It was just like my experience reading it was just so needed at the time I read this. But when I do think about this book, I don't think about like the plot or anything like that. I really don't think about the plot. I just think about certain chapters. And it really is. It's just like certain chapters that I'm thinking about, and then there is just the kind of joined up a little bit, but it is more disjointed than anything else. I totally get that. However, I love this book, and what it made me feel, it cannot be replaced. So yes, Monty, you rose a very good point about this, and honestly, I'm not even arguing on that point. You have a great point there. But I did like some of the tension in this, sexual or otherwise. There was just a lot of character stuff that I really enjoyed in this. There were character interactions I enjoyed in this. I cannot say too much more about this, apart from what it's about. So if you don't know what it's about, which I think you will do, but the core Thorns and Roses series, it's set in a world of Fae, and in the first book, Feyre, she accidentally kills a Fae, and she ends up getting taken to the land of Fae, where she's sort of forced to live in the Fae court and adapt to that world, which is such a sucky way of describing this series, but like I'm trying to minimalize spoilers as much as possible, and plus you guys know what it's about, so I just feel like I'm rehashing shit that you already know. But anyway, I enjoyed this one very, very much. On enjoyment scale, this is a 10. And yeah, I loved it. What more can I say? That's not the last time you will see of Miss Mass. I did also absolutely love House of Earth and Blood, which is the first book in the Crescent City series. I also did a reading vlog of this earlier in the year, and I had so much to say about this book. I love the world in this, actually. Like, this was the first Sarah J Maas book that I read, okay? And I had heard all the criticisms about her writing and things, but I actually think Sarah J Maas is a really good writer. She's very entertaining. Like, that's the main thing that I love about her, is that she just entertains me with her words. And I loved this book. This one follows Bryce, and she lives in Crescent City, and Crescent City is a place where, like, a lot of supernatural things live, you know, like demons and fae and werewolves and all of that. So it's like an urban fantasy with lots of supernatural stuff in it. So I got little bits of True Blood vibes, just a little bit. But then this event happens, this big murder. Now that was a turning point for me, and it happened relatively early in the book as well. And just from that moment on, I was so captivated. There were lulls in the story, but I didn't mind that whatsoever, because I felt like the payoff was quite worth it. I just felt like some of the twists and turns by the end of it, and also Hunt. Hunt. Before this year, I've never ever had like a book boyfriend or anything like that, and then in 2020 I get both Recent and Hunt. Like, honestly, your bitch is spoiled. I've had many a sex dream about Hunt, and honestly I'm not ashamed to admit that. And this is like probably the moment where a lot of people who have subscribed to me recently have started unsubscribing because they've realised what shit taste I have. But at the same time, like, everybody has their own opinions again, and I just love this book. I'm just a sucker for books that thrill me, that entertain me, that make it, like, you know, the reading experience really fun. I'm a sucker for those kinds of books, and this is that book for me. So yeah, I'm not ashamed to love this book, okay? I already feel like I need a reread of this, because I think this was like the 10th book I read this year, and I've read 210 books, so there's some things that I've forgotten about, but the main gist of it, I remember. It's very memorable, for the most part. Obviously, like, not all of it, because I've just contradicted myself, but it is memorable for the most part. Then I have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now this is a kind of retelling of the Trojan War. We follow Achilles, but we also follow Patroclus. Oh my gosh, I'm terrible at character pronunciations. I think it's Patroclus. You do not want to know what I was calling him when I first started reading this. But this is like a love story, but it also is a journey towards like a war. And honestly, like, even though this is one of my favourite books of the year, there is like a lot of stuff that I didn't remember of this book, because I found it quite a bit of a slow burn, but at the same time I didn't mind it too much. I wasn't really that big a fan of Achilles as a person. I did find him really arrogant, but I felt like him and Patroclus, their story together was very well done. I really liked their chemistry. I thought it was very tension filled, and I enjoyed seeing the development of that, and also the the problems that arose from that as well, because it wasn't like a straightforward thing or anything like that. There were problems and lots of things that they had to get through, and obviously it's not, you know, a really happy story at all, and it was interesting to see how he would get to that point. I also really enjoyed Madeline Miller's kind of take on that part of Greek history. Heartbreaking and wonderful, and yeah, I just found it a really, really good read. That's why it's not one of the best books I've read this year, but I will say it's one of the most surprising, because I didn't think that I would truly love this book, and I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know why I wasn't... I think because of the hype. Like, a lot of people said they loved it, and I hadn't read Madeline Miller before, but I have, you know, got Cersei, and I do want to read that at some point. But I was a bit wary of this, but it surprised me by the end. I actually found it quite a beautiful story, and yeah, I liked it enough to put it on this list. I also absolutely loved Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This, again, was a surprise to me because I don't read a lot of sci-fi, and I'd never read Brandon Sanderson before this. So this is set in a world where humans are really scared of an alien race called the Krell, and there are, you know, pilots and schools to train people to fight against the Krell, and Spencer, she really, really, really wants to be a pilot. Her father used to be a pilot, but he had done something really, really bad, and people judge Spencer for it, so she does not have an easy time whatsoever. So when she gets to pilot school, she is victimized a lot, and, you know, people judge her because of her father's actions, so she has to go through all of that as well. I absolutely loved the characters in this. Like, I thought the character work in this was brilliant. I loved all of the people in Spencer's sort of class, and they were going on, you know, adventures together, and they were training together, and I loved all of the banter that they had with each other and how fun and funny it was. I will always remember Mbot though. Mbot is an AI. Spencer ends up coming across this like spaceship that was abandoned, and the AI inside is called Mbot, and he is so sassy and I absolutely love him. I listened to the audiobook as well as reading this physically, and the audiobook was just so fantastic, so well narrated, and I loved all of the accents that the narrator did for each of the characters. It really gave them a level of authenticity, and Mbot was just so well executed in the audiobook too, and I just love the story behind it. It always had this running tension throughout, and I wasn't sure where the story was going to go or how it was going to play out, and I just had like the best time reading this. I remember I read this with Jade and Pris, and again back in January, so that was a very long time ago, but it stuck with me because I had one of the best reading experiences I had this year reading it, and yeah, it was a really great time. Another one by Brandon Sanderson is The Final Empire, and I read this one after months and months and months of Becca telling me to read it, but I finally did read it. It's set in a bit of a dystopian world where ash falls from the sky constantly, and people can get powers from swallowing metal. It sounds bizarre, but there are also people called Mistborn, who are like a rare breed of people who have access to all kinds of allomantic powers. We have a great cast of characters. We follow Vin, and she ends up getting recruited to this like ragtag team of people, led by Kelsia, to overthrow like the Lord Overlord, Lord Ruler, or whatever he was called, to make like a better world kind of thing. And I was loving the experience reading this because I loved the magic system. I felt it was very different to what I've read before, and as I said before, haven't read a whole great deal of adult fantasy, so I could be talking out my arse here. However, I did love the way it was portrayed in this. I thought the world building was excellent. There were some things in this that really surprised me in the way the story went, and it shouldn't have done really, but I'm not going to say why, because even just mentioning the trope or what it, you know, the moment kind of thing, even in as I reference something else, it would give away what happens, and I'm not even going to go there, like literally no spoilers. I was worried I would find this difficult to follow, however, because there was like this main antagonist and there was a plot to follow kind of thing, like there was a straight and narrow path that it needed to go down. While it did diverge from that path, it still, like, it was easy for me to follow personally, and I was really enjoying the experience reading this. It wasn't too much for me, and again, as I said, I should not be intimidated by big books. I'm smarter than I realise, I guess, or that, you know, these kinds of books are for me. I just need to give them a chance. The chapters were bloody long though, but I like the writing style, I like the story, it was easy for me to follow along, and I appreciate that for what it was. And finally, I have Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and I'm not gonna lie, I I've only read the first 5 volumes. I still have the last 4 volumes to read because this is like a compendium of the 9 volumes so far. And I just forgot to pick this up the past few months. I forgot to pick it back up. However, I need to like finish this off. However, from the 5 volumes that I've read, honestly, some of the best storytelling I've read this year. So this follows 2 star-crossed lovers, Marco and Alana. They are supposed to be enemies. They are at different ends of a war that's going on, and they should not be allowed to be together. So when they end up having a baby together, the entire galaxy seems to be out to get them and out to kill them. So this one follows Marco and Alana and their newborn daughter to escape all of that. And it's such an exciting series. I absolutely loved volume 1 so much when I read it. I was like, I don't really read graphic novels. However, this one just, my mind was blown. The storytelling, like the whole world, like there's so much going on in this world, so much creativity and so much imagination in this world, and it's sci-fi as well. And when I say I haven't read a lot of sci-fi, I haven't read a lot, apparently, according to this video. I haven't read a lot of sci-fi before this. It just, I love when a book proves me wrong about a genre, or a genre that I've just been keeping away from because I thought I wasn't going to like it, or that I thought it was going to be too, you know, high concept for me or something like that. But I'm glad I listened to all the great reviews. This was another great recommendation from Becca, who bought me the compendium last year, and I will finish this off. I've been like, I don't know why I haven't. I've been so intrigued. This has kept my excitement level so high, and while I haven't enjoyed some volumes more than other volumes, I just love the story. I've loved the characters. I've loved the family dynamic that's been set up in this as well. That even though this is an exciting story, behind it all there is still that family dynamic. There is still the message of love within a family, and I don't know how it's going to go, and I'm honestly terrified by what's to come. I have no idea what to expect, and I think I'm going to be torn in two. However, I'm enjoying the ride so far anyway, and so this is definitely one of the best books I've read so far this year. It is a graphic novel, but I don't care. Like, I feel like graphic novels should be included in lists like these because it's still a story, and the storytelling is some of the best I've read. And of course the illustrations as well, top notch, top level. So I've been enjoying this so much, and I've been loving it, so I will finish it. But yeah, those were, I think, all of the books that I would consider some of the best and most surprising books that I've read this year in a good way. So I really hope you enjoyed the video, and please leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment, let me know what your best books of 2020 were, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye!